So today we're welcoming Jay Alfred, and he could probably do a better job of introducing himself to this plasma study group than I can. But I noticed he's been publishing papers for 11 years now, since 2020. But it sounds like he's been working with plasma science for 25 years. So we're so glad he's coming from Singapore. Maybe he could give us a little bit more about his background, how he got into this. And we read his papers, really very pertinent for us. Could unidentified aerial phenomenon be from Earth's dark matter biosphere, and his Inter-Terrestrial Aliens Hypothesis? And we also read the formation and structure of Earth's hidden dark matter biosphere. So one of the things I liked was at the end of the formation paper, he did a really nice job with outlining a glossary of what all these terms meant. So it's going to be an exciting day today. Welcome, Jay. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining our humble plasma science study group. We're just doing our best to try to bring your information in plasma science forward into the mainstream of psychic ability, of anomalous phenomenon, of UAP. So thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Rebecca, for having me. And it's a great opportunity to share some of my ideas as well as learn from the experiences of the other group members here. Yeah, as you said, I've been looking at plasma life since the year 2000, when I noticed some things that I'm going to show you now or a bit later. So since 2005, I've actually been publishing. I've a couple of books. The first one being Our Invisible Bodies. What do you think that means? With a plasma ball on the cover of the book. So that was 2005, 20 years ago. And subsequently, there were a couple of other books. And then I've also written numerous articles. And then more recently, in academia.edu, I've sort of published a few, like 20 papers, which are much more detailed than what was previously. As what I mentioned, we were discussing just now. When I initially started, I was just talking about anecdotal experiences, about this person's experience or that person's experience, and quoting from this source or that source, But thing is, if you want to talk about something that you think is important to scientists, you have to come up with a theory. You have to come up with an internally self-consistent theory which explains all these anecdotal experiences and more, And that is why, like about 15 years ago, I sort of, 10 to 15 years ago, I sort of reverted to looking at more at the scientific theories and extrapolating the current scientific theory like string theory, M theory, plasma physics, dark matter physics. Yeah, so dark matter plays a very important part in the whole structure of the explanation, as what I was discussing also just now, that ordinary plasma life. Many people talk about ordinary plasma lives. Suddenly there's an explosion in 2025, right? You sort of open up YouTube and you see, wow, this person talking about plasma life and that person talking about, but they don't really reflect on what they are talking about. I mean, are you talking about ordinary plasma life? They don't even make that sort of like, they don't even reflect on what type of plasma life are they talking about and whether it is possible, which are the plasma lives that are possible on Earth and which are not possible. Okay, so I recently came up with a paper, as what I mentioned also, on why ordinary plasma life does not exist on Earth. I'm not saying that primitive plasma life cannot exist on plasma clouds and things like that. It's possible. So so it's a very nuanced approach. It's sort of like you have to look at the environment. I think I wrote, I wrote the paper on plasma spheres on academia.edu, and I did cover, each region, the Earth, the atmosphere, just outside the atmosphere, the plasma clouds, the magnetosphere, and so on and so forth. So the different regions have got different degrees of the ability to support ordinary plasma life. But even then, because of certain reasons, which I did not actually intend to cover here, but because of certain reasons, it is very difficult to support ordinary plasma life, especially on Earth. Why? Because firstly, as what I mentioned, the electromagnetic strength is very strong. It's 10 to the power of 39 times stronger than gravity. The moment you can put a proton and an electron next to each other and they'll just, you won't even see it. It'll just instantaneously recombine to form an atom or a molecule on the surface of the Earth because the temperature is very low. Okay, in order to spread, or in order to separate charge separation, right? Separate the proton from electron, you need very high temperatures. I'm not talking about 100 degrees or 200 degrees. I'm talking about thousands of degrees, 4,000 degrees, like argon. You need 10,000 degrees, right? 10,000 degrees to separate the charges. On Earth, you've got 30 degrees centigrade or 28 degrees centigrade. That's not going to work because the electromagnetic force is so strong, you'll just bring the particles together. The only way is to separate it is to use heat or to sort of increase the temperature to separate it. But the temperature is only 30 degrees centigrade. That is why you don't find plasma on the surface of the Earth unless it is bottled up like in a fluorescent lamp or neon tube or whatever. The moment the neon tube cracks, the plasma instantaneously disappears. There is no ordinary plasma, okay, on the surface of the Earth. In fact, you can even calculate how much of plasma there could be on the surface of the Earth using the Saha equation, physics, right? It is 0.0000 120 zeros, more than 120 zeros before you get to the first one. So it's practically zero plasma on the surface of the Earth. And so the recombination rates are very fast. So when people talk about ordinary plasma life or ordinary plasma on the surface of the Earth, you have to be very skeptical. You have to ask, what is the temperature of the surface of the Earth? What is the recombination rate? If you use plasma physics, when you calculate the fraction of ionization, what do you get? Right? So a lot of people on YouTube are talking about plasma life, but they do not exactly know what plasma. A lot of people do have anecdotal experiences. I believe that they do have. I'm not too skeptical about that. But they may be misinterpreting the experience as ordinary plasma life. It may be something other than that. Okay? And I'm going to tell you why dark plasma, not ordinary plasma, dark plasma does the job much better. Okay. So I've started a sort of a field called plasma and dark astrobiology. So I'm actually doing it as part of astrobiology. So most astrobiologists just look at one segment of the universe as what various observational satellites and probes have sort of come up with in terms of the percentage of in terms of the different types of matter on Earth, or rather in the universe, right? Under what you call the lambda model, right? You have about 15% ordinary matter, right? I'm talking about the universe as a whole. 15% ordinary matter and 85% dark matter. That's the latest estimate. Now, out of this 85% dark matter, 15% is what Lisa Randall says is self-interacting dark matter, and 70% is collisionless dark matter. Okay, so for decades, right, we have been looking at. If you talk to the public, all they know is about this collisionless plasma or collisionless dark matter, which does not interact with other particles. So it's very inert, right? But since 2013, right, with Lisa Randall and Lottie Ackerman and Sean Carroll and all these people, right, they have been suggesting that dark matter may not be inert. The bulk is inert, but there is a fraction, 15% of matter could be what we call self-interacting dark matter, which means that there are dark protons and dark electrons and dark electromagnetic forces. Dark simply means it's invisible. It does not interact with our electromagnetism in a direct way. I'm just saying it generally, but there are situations where it does not interact, but it converts into our ordinary electromagnetism. So given all this, the field that I studied is called plasma and dark astrobiology, because I'm studying life not in the 15% ordinary matter, but in the 85% dark matter. Okay, so I mean, I normally make fun of ordinary astrobiologists by saying that, it's just like the metaphor about the drunkard who's looking at finding his keys just below the street lamp where it is bright, but all the dark areas around it, he's not really searching for it. So that's why I call that's the meaning of this plasma and dark astrobiology kind of a term, right? Now, so in order to do this plasma and dark astrobiology, you have to know a little bit of plasma physics, you have to know about dark matter physics, right? You have to know about evolutionary biology, you have to know about developmental biology. I cover all this, and also a little bit of anthropology. And that's exactly what we're going to do in part 1 today, which is look at ancient traditions and see whether there's any possible plasma phenomena that to them it is not. I mean, to them is, based on their culture, they will interpret it in a certain way. For example, if a commercial airliner suddenly appears in the 11th century, they're not going to say it's an aeroplane, it's a commercial airliner. They're going to say, oh, it's a big bird which was, issuing fire and making a thunderous sound and so on and so forth. So we are not endorsing any belief systems, but we are endorsing their observations of physical phenomena, which may point to plasma phenomena, right? So you look around all the ancient traditions, right? If you look at Hinduism, you look at Tibetan Buddhism, even the ancient Egyptians, right? They basically, and even the Chinese, basically Taoism, Chinese acupuncture, and so on and so forth. What do you have? You keep on hearing about meridians and chakras. What are these? Okay, there have been many experiments on the meridians, and what they find is there's a lot of electrical. It is electrical in nature. There's a lot of electrical interactions that in a laboratory they have studied, which relates to where the meridians would be. So this suggests there's some the meridians are electrical in nature. Now you put two filaments together, you put two meridians from the perspective of plasma, you could call it a filament, right? A plasma filament. You put two filaments together, the vortexes will appear. So these are all very natural processes, very well understood, well studied structures in plasma physics, right? So the thing is, it is all, if you just look at any metaphysical description of a subtle body, you can see it all there. You can see the concentric shells, which is typical plasma signature feature. You can see the meridians. You can see the vortexes. You can see the plasmoids, right? They also talk about fields, electrical and magnetic fields, right? What are electric and magnetic fields doing in a biochemical body, right? If you're talking about 10th century, talking about 1st century, they're talking about the same thing: the meridians, the vortexes, the concentric shells. Whether you're talking about theosophy or the Rosicrucians or the whoever. It's all under the perennial philosophy, right? They have all these descriptions, right? And it's all the same. All these are according to my analysis, which actually all this I talked about it in 2005 now. So sort of analyze how this came about, and it comes out so naturally from plasma physics, which suggests that it is not only structurally similar, is functionally also similar. And some people say, oh, no, it's just some hydrodynamic features in the biochemical body. But it does not only contain fluidic structures like vortexes, it also contains crystalline structures like the concentric shells. So it's got both fluidic and crystalline properties, which are typical of plasma. So if you look at the West, right, you've got Christianity, Islam and Judaism. Well, I mean, I've written a paper on possible plasma phenomena in the anecdotal religious literature, which you can find in academia.edu, right? You've got the burning bush, which does not burn. What do you mean burning bush does not burn? It sounds like a neon tube who can talk and so on and so forth, And then you've got the tongues of fire on Pentecost, right? Which came and settled on, the heads of each of the apostles, right? This is conductivity. It's just basically, it's just being, charge attractions, and why is it a fire? Why is Pentecost a fire? Yeah. Then in Islam, you have the jinns, right? The jinns. That's only one characterization of plasma life. I've written a couple of articles. I mean, the first article, I think in 2005 or 2007, I've written a couple of articles on genes, but genes are only one particular characterization. And then if you look at the shamanic traditions, right, globally, right, from Australia to Africa to the Americas, right, the Australian Aborigines, they got the rainbow serpent and so on and so forth. The Zulus, have the lightning birds and all. The Navajos have the, light beings. The Incas have their own, versions of it. And all of these traditions actually also talk about meridians and chakras. Maybe not the 7 chakras or 12 chakras. They may have only 3 chakras. And it may not be the 360 acupoints of Chinese acupuncture. Okay, but they do recognize filaments and meridians. So the takeaway here is that this is a global phenomenon. It is not something related to one specific culture or one specific tradition. Although the Chinese and the Indians have done a little bit more on sort of mapping out all this intricate structure, but the most important takeaway, because I've spoken to a few people and they come out with, like, oh yeah, plasma life, yeah, and they relate it back to their belief system. But in the 21st century, I think we have the opportunity to have a global mind, sort of a global perspective, and look at it, across the world. And with that, you can come up with a science, rather than, just cultural traditions, which are starting points, but they're not, but they're not going to be the end points. So I would say that anybody thinking about, let's say, jinns in Islamic literature, or or just meridians and chakras in Indian literature, yoga literature, you have to broaden the perspective and take in all the other traditions and see all the similarities. And of course, everything gels with plasma physics. Everything gels when you using the plasma physics template to explain. So maybe I will share. Now I will share. I've got 16 slides in part 1, and then we will sort of have a chat on this. I want to know a little bit about your, maybe your impressions about what all these are. Are these really plasma? You can be skeptical, say, no, these are not, this is not, nothing to do with plasma. Or you could say, yeah, I've actually sort of have sensation of electrical sensations and something whirling around my chest and things like that, And yeah, so you could relate it. So maybe I can share this. Shall I share this part 1? Yeah. Yeah. Can you see it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we've all seen this type of description, metaphysical descriptions. filaments or filamentary currents in the metaphysical descriptions. On the left, you actually see an actual plasma ball with, you've seen it many times with all these currents. Now, whenever there are anisotropies or imbalances in density, temperature, okay, or gravitational gradations, right, in a plasma, you could have a concentration of charges which form currents, okay? And these currents, when they form magnetic fields, and the magnetic fields actually pinch the filaments, pinch the currents to make them into long, thin filaments. And that's how you get these filaments, okay, from the plasma perspective. Now, let's go through this pathway 1 to see what happens next. So, of course, here you can see the acupuncture, meridians, and look at how similar they are to the filaments. Okay, when a current goes, when charged particles go up a wire, right? They basically is a current. They generate circular magnetic fields, circular magnetic field lines. Okay. Now imagine there are a couple of these circular magnetic field lines, and the currents, when the charged particles are pushing up the wire, right? They're going to create a shear force. When this happens, okay, see the circular magnetic fields, put a series of that, and put a current pushing it up, you have a shear force. What it will morph into is this helical shape, which you probably would be already familiar with. So it can be explained by simple physics. I mean, this is physics that you study in, in high school or something like that. Okay, it's not something very strange. Okay. So of course you see this many times in a lot of metaphysical descriptions. This helical sort of filamentary things. Okay, in this on the right you can see a plasma snake, a filament, okay, which is going around a magnetic field, a current which is going around a magnetic field. These are called Birkeland currents, right? And then in the lab again, you can see plasma double helix, because if you have two currents, okay, counter streaming currents, you've got two helical fields or two helical currents. So you call it a double helix in the lab, and you can see it in space. So this is not an illustration. It's actual image of a helical structure in space. This is plasma. This is of course plasma. This is plasma in the lab. Question is this plasma also? This metaphysical description, is it plasma? It's so alike, it behaves the same, right? Now, when there's a helical current around, when there's a helical current, right, it generates a magnetic field. That's how you get this magnetic field. And here you can see in metaphysical descriptions, fields appearing. Okay. Now, I was talking about two currents. I mean, anybody who has seen this, the Ida and Pingala and, and the Sushumna and so on and so forth, you'll be very familiar with it. So 20 years ago, I wrote it. There are actually two currents here, two straight currents. It actually can get quite complicated, I'll tell you, because the current produces a magnetic field. The magnetic field produces the current. Then the current again produces a magnetic field. It goes on. It's sort of like, it goes on and on. Huh? So over here, okay, let's say you've got two vertical currents here. Okay, one going down and one going up. Okay, and each of these currents are going to produce, each of them are going to produce a helical current. And these helical currents are going to interlock with each other. One is going up, one is going down. Okay, the one that is going up are the heavier particles, which are going up slowly. And then the one that is going down is the lighter particles, okay, to the core, to your core. So why particles go up and down and everything is actually very very, it's just electricity is a very simple electromagnetics, right? And when this happens, when these helical fields, right, form, right, each of them form a magnetic field. So the left one produces a magnetic field, the right one produces a magnetic field. So you got interlocking, two magnetic fields which are interlocking. Okay. And I wonder whether I should get a little bit more complicated, but let me give you something which is quite interesting. These magnetic fields, right? You see, every time the current appears, right, there's a magnetic field. Every time a magnetic field appears, charged particles are going to rush into the field lines. Okay, they're going to rush into the field lines to create Birkeland currents. And when this helical Birkeland current forms, they form magnetic fields like this. When this magnetic field forms, charged particles are going to rush into that. Okay, so when charged particles move into these field lines, they're going to rush through. They are actually rotating around the magnetic field lines, or this way. Okay, and so therefore you have two magnetic field, or rather the charged particles in the magnetic field lines are actually rotating. So you will have two shells. And because the magnetic field lines, I mean, you've got one magnetic field line here, got another magnetic field line here, you got another magnetic field line here. Each of this field line is not just one, it goes around the bar, the solenoid, right? This one. And this one also goes round. This one also goes round. So what do you think it will sort of create? The first one will create a shell. It'll create a shell. The second one will create a shell. The third one will create a shell. So that's how you get concentric shells. You can see any subtle body description. You've got nested shells. Where did the nested shells come from? Is what I was mentioning. The helical currents produce magnetic fields. The charged particles rush into the magnetic field lines, and each of the magnetic field line is the skeleton, okay, that supports a nested a shell. And because there are so many of these shells, okay, you've got a series of nested shells, and each of these magnetic fields produced by the helical current are actually generated by different particles. That means, in other words, when I say there are two currents, one current is, let's say, electrons. The other current is, let's say, protons. Okay, and it is actually in different directions. So they are actually rotating in different directions. The magnetic field lines and the shells of each field structure generated by the helical current is rotating in a different direction. That means you have nested shells which are counter-rotating. Okay, this is, anybody familiar with plasma, you know that this is typical plasma kind of when we talk about Birkeland currents and so on and so forth, this is exactly what you get. I mean, counter-rotating shells and so on and so forth. So over here, you can see in the subtle bodies literature, you can see that they always display them based on these are concentric shells. So that's one sort of like pathway that you can go to see how these things form. Now let's look at the other pathway and what that forms. Okay, so again we start with the filaments. I mean, we know how filaments form because of density gradations or temperature gradations or gravitational gradations, right? Now, if you put two filaments together, as what I said, two different currents next to each other, you've got counter streaming currents. you're going to generate, okay, all the particles in the red arrow are rushing up. All the particles in the blue arrow are rushing down. Okay, now if this red arrow, red filament, and this blue filament pinch each other, and one current is going down and one current is going up, it's going to generate a torque. It's going to generate a torque, which is a turning momentum, right? And that's how vortexes appear. Initially, there will be what we call a plasmoid. When they pinch, right, there will be a sudden increase in density of plasma in that area, and that's why a plasmoid forms. As they go around, as they rush around, the charged particles rush around, you have a vortex. Okay. Besides parallel currents, you can even have structures where there are cross currents. I mean, where there are cross currents, you also have a plasmoid in the center here, and the plasmoid will evolve into a vortex. So I mean, I'm only talking about these two central currents, but of course, filaments are all over the subtle body, is what we normally sort of like reported. So if all the small little filaments all over the body, when they sort of cross each other, they're going to form plasmoid. Of course, you know that plasmoids seems very much like acupoints, right? And vortexes seem to suggest chakras, right? So in the central current, you have all the large vortexes. And I've gone into some detail about this. If you read my paper on a biological blueprint for plasma life forms, actually go into very, very even more detail than this. Okay, and once the vortexes form, they can start to absorb energy. And after utilizing the energy, they will disperse it. Now, what that means is that the central vortexes, okay, you got the polar vortex, you got the central vortexes, okay, they are actually double vortex systems. That means there's one at the front of the body, there's a vortex opening up, absorbing charged particles. And then there is a tube. He goes behind the body, and there's another vortex there, which sort of releases the charged particles. Okay, and all these particles, when the energy is absorbed, right, they go through the filamentary current system. Okay, and in Taoism, in Chinese acupuncture, they talk about capacitors. Okay, so what happens to these charged particles after the energy has been consumed, but you still have a lot of charged particles? Where do they go to? Well, you can store them in the capacitors. Okay, there are natural capacitors in plasma. These are called double layers, right? So a lot of it, if you read Qigong literature and things like that, they will say, oh yeah, there's a lot of this energy is sort of stored around the tummy area, right? Tummy area, right? So over there, you can have, a lot of double layers, which act as capacitors to store the energy. So you've got the absorption of the energy, the usage of the energy, the storage of the energy, and also the expulsion of the energy or excretion of the energy. So it's a complete metabolic system. Okay, so this is, of course, a feature of life. I mean, metabolism is one, replication is another, evolution is another. These are all characteristics of life forms of life. So here you can see plasmoids in space, plasmoids in metaphysical literature, and of course, plasmoids evolve into vortexes. Here you can see a double vortex system. See, this is not my illustration. No? This is from Leadbeater. I don't know whether you know Leadbeater. Leadbeater is from is one of the most respected theosophists. Okay, because he's very detailed and clinical about everything he does. So it's very useful for scientific analysis. So it's actually from theosophy kind of literature that you get this. So double vortex system inevitably form in the way I was saying, right? If you ask your AI, artificial intelligence, okay, how this what will happen next? I mean, when these vortexes form, when these filaments touch each other, it's going to produce double vortex system, which is exactly what you see in the metaphysical literature. Okay, over here you can, on the left hand side, you can see the plasma vortex in the lab, the laboratory. Okay, these two examples. You can even see it here whirling. Okay, in the metaphysical literature, you can see the polar vortex, the lateral vortexes. These are the central vortexes, but every acupoint is also a vortex. There's a tiny microscopic acupoint. They also are rotating. Rotating vortexes actually produce magnetic fields. Okay, now here again, you can see this on the left-hand side, right? What you're seeing is Leadbitter's illustration of a chakra. He's a clairvoyant, basically, yeah. Or you can look at Barbara Brennan's illustrations also. Okay, you can see what he when he sees a vortex, he sees this. Do you know what is in the right on the right? This is a plasma gun. This is an actual plasma gun. Look at the plasma gun and the chakra, the illustration. It's almost is extremely similar. You've got the radial lines. You've got the, circular and all these features here in the center is circular. Here you've got, these lines coming out, and they are rotating. They are rotating, and of course here you can see, the same thing. But yeah, and by the way, what I also want to say is that I wrote this in 2008 in New Dawn magazine. I wrote about this in 2008. Okay. Now, as what I mentioned, when the vortexes rotate, right? Every vortex has a magnetic field. They generate a magnetic field because it's actually currents going around. Okay. When they are rotating fast, right? They actually twist the magnetic field. When they twist the magnetic field starts to store magnetic tension. Okay, tension. Now, when the tension is released, right, a beam, I mean, you can actually, a plasma beam can be sort of like ejected from that particular vortex. Okay. On the left, you can see a cosmic jet in space. In the lab, you can see all these beams. Okay, over here. Why can't a plasma life form with its vortexes not issue a beam? Okay, it actually has the mechanical parts to do that. So of course, when you see a lot of illustrations, okay, of so-called divinities and so on and so forth, okay, in each cultural tradition, you can see them issuing beams of light and things like that. Okay, these are basically beams issuing out of vortexes, and you know exactly the physics relating to that. Over here, besides all those features that we talk about, you can also see practically every metaphysical description talking about the coronas, talking about granulation of the body. Okay, a plasma body has granulation, has spicules, has striations. So these are all the general features which are typical of plasma and typical of subtle body illustrations. And here again, I mean, this illustration, just to show you, came from the 2008. I wrote 2 articles on this, 2008 and 2009. Now, moving up from there, I think I caught a presentation in this plasma science group about ley lines, right? Now, what are ley lines and what are all these secret sites? Immediately, you would know that, that they the ley lines actually resemble filamentary currents. The secret sites, the vortexes, they seem to suggest, the vortexes, or rather the secret site seems to suggest that there are vortexes here. So the important point about showing you this picture is, if this happens on Earth, where are they? Where are the filamentary currents? Where are the chakras? Does this mean that that Earth itself has a plasma body, is it a sort of like an invisible plasma body or plasma biosphere? That's the question. So I'll stop here for a minute to find out from you whether you have any comments.
A question popped in my head regarding something I heard recently about Nikola Tesla.
Mhm.
That the theory was that he was using ley lines to basically electricity was traveling under the ground, and he lit up a bunch of light bulbs in the ground. But even Tesla's assistant didn't know how he did it. Do you think that might be related to ley lines and plasma and electromagnetic energy?
Yeah, sure, but you have to be careful about which sector you're talking about. So if you think about multiverse, right, we are only one of the universes in a multiverse. If you can entertain a thought that there are many universes, and just like nested concentric shells, there are nested universes, we're actually in the same space as our neighboring universe. Okay, I call it Alpha 1. I call this universe Alpha 2. I call that Alpha 1. It's a dark matter universe, which is basically an invisible universe. Okay. Now, as what I mentioned earlier, Alpha 2, our universe, cannot support ordinary coherent plasma structures, okay, on the surface of the Earth. Okay, on the surface of the Earth, the temperature is too low, recombination rates are too high. So where do you think the ley lines in the sacred sites in the vortexes are? They are not in this universe. They are in according to my view. Of course, different people have different views. According to my view, what you're actually interacting with is plasma filaments and plasma vortexes, which are in our neighboring mirror universe.
Wow.
So during Nikola Tesla time, people started talking about dark matter since 1933, or maybe a little bit earlier than that. But 1933, there was a sort of a flare up about this dark matter and things like that. Then in the 70s, Vera Rubin took it up, and then it sort of became a more established field of study in physics. Okay, but during Tesla time, there could have been talk about dark matter and things like that, but not in the mainstream literature. Okay, so he could have tapped into that. Whether he knew all about it, I do not know, but very unlikely, because it's so difficult to actually interact with dark matter. But we do have certain ways of there are certain portals which are recognized in physics, which do allow interactions between Alpha 2, the dark matter universe, and Alpha 1, which I'll sort of briefly touch on later. So there could be portals between them.
Would those portals be only in, for example, the sacred sites around the Earth?
So the filaments and the vortexes, right, are the places where, okay, they are actually situated in a in a plasma sphere. All these filaments are just like if you look at any plasma body, right, the filaments are inside the plasma and the vortexes are inside the plasma, and basically it's inside a plasma sphere. So if the Earth has a plasma sphere, let's say a dark plasma sphere, okay, with these filaments and these vortexes, right? These filaments and vortexes are the places where there is the highest density of dark matter particles. In other words, dark electrons and dark protons and so on and so forth. Okay, so vortexes are the charged particles in vortexes are extremely high density. Okay, and the charged particles that are moving through the filaments are actually very high density. So when you say sacred sites and sacred sites are places where there is a vortex of charged dark matter particles whirling around. Okay, what happens when they whirl around? What happens when dark matter particles whirl around? They're going to collide with ordinary matter particles. You can't see dark matter. First of all, they are invisible matter. You can't see dark matter. So how come I suddenly see, these colors and so on and so forth? What happens is that the dark matter particles, as they're rushing through, right, the vortexes, right, they're going to hit against ordinary matter particles, ordinary matter atoms, let's say, and they're going to kick the nucleus out or the electron out. When the electron moves out of the atom, right, basically they create a plasma, an ordinary plasma which you can see. Okay, and when they come back, they release energy. So this is an indirect way of seeing dark matter. It's an indirect way. So that is what most, people who are meditating or things like that, or maybe even ordinary people. It is actually ordinary plasma. You're not seeing the actual plasma. So it's similarly for UFOs, right? You are seeing the ordinary plasma representation of the dark plasma life form or the dark plasma biological UFO. You're not actually seeing unless, of course, you're a clairvoyant. If you're clairvoyant, you can switch your locus of consciousness from ordinary consciousness to dark side. Okay, that's like Barbara Brennan. I don't know whether you've heard of Barbara Brennan, who's really, she's good because she was a former NASA scientist, so she does it in a very analytical manner, and that helps me and a lot of other researchers, to understand specifically what's going on, rather than anecdotal experiences. Very, very, very specific scientific information she gives. Yeah.
Thank you.
Paul, John Paul, you
Yeah,
want to
I have two questions. One question, just in terms of terminology, plasma and plasmoid. What is the difference between plasma and the designation of plasmoid?
Okay, so plasma is just the fourth state of matter, is what you say about. In actual fact, it's the first state of matter because it's 99.9% of the universe. So plasma is just the terminology used when you're describing the fourth state of matter, where charged particles are separated, okay, in a kind of a soup of charged particles. And plasmoid is a very specific structure in plasma. For example, when two filaments cross each other, pinch each other, suddenly there's a higher density of plasma in that pinch. Okay, and that's what I call plasma. Plasmoid has, certain people interpret it in slightly different ways, but as far as when I'm speaking, I'm talking about plasma. A higher density region in the plasma is called a plasmoid. Yeah.
Okay, so in a sense, plasma is the whole field, where plasmoid might be specific forms. Are there multiple structures of plasmoids?
Yes. So there are different types of plasmoids. In the major chakras in the body, you've got all the the large plasmoid. But the acupoints in Chinese literature, you can consider them as microscopic plasmoids. Now, as what I said previously, they actually contain magnetic fields. Plasmoids actually generate magnetic fields and evolve into vortexes because of the counter-streaming currents which I talked about. Right?
Okay, so in that context, then, are you familiar with again? Rebecca had, and we all heard this last week on the steps of the Capitol, that the U.S. government knows about sentient plasmoid life. Can you comment on what that might mean? What is the meaning of sentient plasmoid life?
Okay. I've been talking about sentient plasma life for the past 25 years, and then recently, I don't know, 2024, 2025, somebody, a group of academics started talking about thermosphere and possible plasma life in the thermosphere. Now, as what I mentioned before, ordinary plasma life is very difficult to sustain. Coherent plasma structures are very difficult to sustain on Earth. Okay, and so nevertheless, it does not totally rule out what we call proto-life. That means things that are almost life, proto-life, like for example, when Losnaniel and Sandalovocio, right, in a laboratory, they created what we call plasma cells, which has a nucleus, which has a membrane, which actually absorbs so-called nutrients from the atmosphere. They can replicate and so on and so forth. I call it proto-life, just like viruses. Viruses are proto-life. They are neither life nor non-life. Okay, such things may appear for a brief, very, very brief period, and then it goes off. So when it's not only, I mean, I pointed out this in 20 years ago with the MOD report. I don't know whether you remember the MOD report, which said the Ministry of Defense from UK, the UK MOD report, which talked about also they basically the same thing, and they talked about an electromagnetism. One of their conclusion was, after studying all the plasma objects, right, they came to a conclusion that the electromagnetism that relates to these objects are not the same electromagnetism that we are talking about. So they are differentiating it from ordinary electromagnetism. So that is why I say there could be a dark sector. A dark sector has dark electrons, dark protons. It has got dark electromagnetism, which exactly fits what I'm saying, which is what you're looking at in terms of more complex life. I'm not talking about the little things that flicker in and out in the atmosphere. There's most of the phenomena that we see are just basically transient plasma phenomena, which is non-life. And then you could, I mean, if you really want to stretch it, you could say, oh yeah, there's a little bit of proto-life and so on and so forth. But if you're talking about complex life, which appears in a room, that is not ordinary plasma. That is from Alpha 1, our parent universe. Those guys are from Alpha 1, our parent universe, okay, which are composed of dark plasma. So dark plasma does not interact with ordinary matter unless, as what I say, in certain indirect ways, in terms of portals and other sort of processes like what we call kinetic mixing, and we've got, since 2016, we've got a very strong candidate for to support a fundamental fifth force. I mean, we've got four forces. We are talking about a fundamental fifth force. A lot of astrophysical observations and laboratory experiments seem to suggest that there is a particle now called the X17, okay, which can possibly mediate a fifth force. Okay, so that it is not, I mean, if we are living in a multiverse, we are nested, just like the nested shells, we are nested in so many larger and larger universes. It'll be very difficult to have interactions with, let's say, the fourth or the fifth or the sixth highest energy universe. So logically, most of the interaction should come from our neighboring universe. Correct? Do you agree with that? Yeah. So if that is the case, I mean, to answer your question, right?
Mhm.
What specifically are you talking about in terms of the plasma life that they see?
Well, I'm just responding to this David Grush, who is a whistleblower who was apparently on the inside in terms of
Yeah.
what the government, and they asked him the question, and his response was that they are aware of sentient plasmoid life. And I'm just wanting to know what that
Yeah.
might be. But also what was coming up is I was wondering what might be the different resonance or vibration or frequencies between the electromagnetic fields and what is plasma and what is dark plasma. Ordinary, is
Yeah.
there a resonance or some type of
Yes,
rhythm?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's a very good question because I
Mhm.
think I need to segue into my part two.
Hey, could
Okay,
we take,
sure.
excuse me, could we go ahead and Toby and Nicole have a quick question and then we'll go on to part two.
Okay.
Toby, please.
Actually, I think I'm gonna leave my stuff maybe for like at the end. I'm gonna let him continue. It wasn't so much of a question as much of something to add on. So I don't want to break his flow. I'll let him continue, and then
Okay.
if there's some sort of opportunity later, I'll just mention it then.
Okay, Toby, I'll remember. Nicole, did you want to
Yeah, just
comment?
a quick comment. Like, I think that this science is really relieving. And it's interesting to hear that these spiritual ideas or that there's a science behind them. But I think we're going to have a lot of compassion for people that are tightly wound to belief systems around miraculous appearances or religious protocols that are attached to these, you know, miraculous, burning bushes. And I don't know, Jay, I know you're a scientist, but do you have any comments about like the process to navigate? Because it's going to be a big socio-cultural change to say, oh, by the way, there's a science, there's a reason. And maybe like miracles is just a science we don't quite, or technology we don't quite know yet, but it's more of a kind of emotional comment.
Yeah, that's very, very important observation because I've seen scientists like brush away, people are talking about the belief systems. I don't believe that is a very productive way of reacting to the anecdotal evidence. If they're actually communicating anecdotal evidence, we should look at it as the evolution of human life and human consciousness. I mean, even when they found out that the sun, I mean that the earth was revolving around the sun, the masses did not know about this. It took them like 200 years before most people agreed, yeah, that it wasn't the sun that was revolving around the earth, but the earth that was revolving around the sun. So we have to give time for people to sort of assimilate the scientific information and use the scientific information to strengthen their belief systems, as it were, but also amend the belief system to be consistent with the science, but not overnight. I mean, it's not to, I mean, we're not going to do it overnight. We're going to do it over maybe a century, slowly evolving so that it becomes spirituality becomes a little bit more systematic, as it were, and if there's, if there is a way of, let's say you sit down and meditate, but you do not know what you just basically, just go with the flow. We say, yeah, okay, just close your eyes and, think of nothing or just stop your thoughts or actually developing a concentration and so on and so forth. How do you accelerate that process? If you know a little bit about the science, it may actually help you. Correct? Now, and having said that, the practitioners are very important, no matter what their belief system is. Okay, no matter what the belief system is, if you arrive at the same point as another meditator who's using a different belief system, it doesn't matter. Or if a scientist is using science to come to the same point, it doesn't, all the rivers flowing into the ocean or whatever, so we can actually accommodate different belief systems and not to brush them aside, but we can accommodate and co-evolve with them. And of course, as the science permeates into their belief system, the belief system will become more robust. And what you will find, if more and more of the science goes into belief system 1, 2, 3, 4, they will have a common understanding of the same phenomena. And that is actually very good. I mean, that's going to promote both spirituality and the scientific understanding, Yeah. Because I'm only giving like 1% of the 1% of my dark plasma theory, but there is I believe there is a multiverse. I mean, and you basically go from one existence to another, right? You pop in and out of existence in a multiverse, in different universes. And I'm not saying this in a metaphysical sense. I'm actually working on a paper now, and it seems to solve a lot of problems. I mean, this particular model seems to solve a lot of problems, and this model actually comes from metaphysical literature. Okay, so I believe that a lot of the anecdotal evidence actually suggests scientific possibilities, but scientists are currently not looking at it seriously. because of various biases, right? But going forward, if science permeates into the belief system, that the belief system come closer, and all the belief systems share a common sort of like explanation, I think spirituality will be like very natural, and it will accelerate spirituality, it won't dampen it.
Okay, please, Jay, do you want to go ahead? Thanks, Nicole. Do you want to go ahead and start your next section?
Yeah, sure. No, I was looking at the chat. Nicole Richmond says, strengthen the truth of their beliefs, validate their miracles through scientific proof. Yeah. And yeah, validate the authentic miracles through scientific proof, but criticize and discard things that are superstitious and not based on proper observations. It's not only from the scientific perspective that we advise this. Even in metaphysical literature, they say get a guru or whatever, somebody more experienced than you to tell you actually what's happening, rather than you assuming everything, right? And that's very important. And even in the metaphysical literature, they say be critical. And even in Buddhism, they say inquire, ask questions. Don't just accept things. So the criticality is still very important, huh?
I just think it's going to be kind of heartbreaking for some people to come to this because it's been very hierarchical to be at the top of a power system because you control the miracles or you control the religious
Yeah.
beliefs or this, spiritual
It
power.
could be
But
political, yeah. It
Yeah.
could be political, yeah. So
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
it's quite dangerous for anyone delving into this. But I mean, truth must march on. I mean, it's basically, I mean, you can't be cowed by, different belief systems. I mean, certain belief system may take a militant view on it and things like that. But the thing is, all the belief systems do have some element of truth. I mean, and that, you see, despite whatever the theory about it, the practice actually has value. It doesn't matter what the theory is, so long as you practice. I actually value the practitioners as important as the theories. The practitioners are very important. But they could be using a theory which is totally nonsensical from the scientific point of view. But so long as it gets them to where they want to be, I think that's okay, right? But I think I spoke about 200 years for people to come to the realization that the Earth was revolving around the sun. But now with internet and YouTube and so on and so forth, I think the process of evolution will be much faster. Okay, so now we go on to the Okay, so you see the vortexes and the filamentary currents here in this particular illustration. Now, part 2 is I'm going to touch a little bit about the Inter-Terrestrial Aliens Hypothesis, ITH, Inter-Terrestrial Aliens Hypothesis, which I've come up with. And I noticed that some parts of it is quite similar to Jacques Vallée ideas. Okay, Jacques Vallée also did not really buy the extraterrestrial theory. The extraterrestrial hypothesis is that aliens from our universe, from other star systems, are here. Now the problem is there are quite a number of problems when we're talking about that. I mean, the first one will be the travel problem, right? In terms of the technology that you need. I mean, even so far we've only, in terms of manned spacecraft, we have only gone to the moon. We haven't even gone to Mars. Talk about flying from one star to another star in our galaxy. Okay, a lot of people have come and said, "Oh yeah, this fancy technology, that fancy that." These are all speculative technologies, and there are other reasons also, not only technology, but there are other reasons why it doesn't make much sense. The second problem is the ROI problem, the return on investment. Why would an intelligent, advanced civilization go from one side of the galaxy to another side of the galaxy, okay? And, just to visit a less advanced civilization, okay, on a speck of dust, I mean, if you're coming into the solar system, you can't even see the planets. You can only see the sun. Why come to Earth? I mean, why come to Earth? What is it for them? I mean, what it actually it doesn't it's not free, you know. It's actually cost time, cost lives, and even cost, you know, money to come all the way from one side of the galaxy to another, or even more impossible, from one galaxy to another. Okay, then the messaging problem. We have the messaging problem too. What do the aliens say? Oh, save the Earth, and, you know, don't destroy the Earth. And why on earth would an alien civilization, advanced civilization living in another star system, want to warn us about our Earth and not to sort of damage it or whatever? It doesn't make sense. Okay, why go all the way, light years away, to come to a speck of dust and tell the less advanced civilization that you're destroying the Earth and blah blah blah? So it doesn't make sense. The fourth reason is what I call the paranormal enigma. UFOs and UAPs have often, you know, in terms of the anecdotal evidence, right? We've seen many cases where they talk about abductions and so on and so forth. Your body, you're lying on bed, and then your body sort of like floats above your body and goes out the window, and it goes into the spacecraft. Now, is that your ordinary matter body? Right? Kenneth Ring and a lot of researchers have said there's a lot of overlap between paranormal phenomena and UFO phenomena. But if you take a standard extraterrestrial kind of hypothesis view, okay, involving ordinary matter and carbon and water-based kind of life forms, right? How do you explain it? They have a lot of problems explaining it, and of course they try to use technology, very sophisticated technologies, to explain it and things like that. But is, first of all, highly speculative, and it doesn't really work. Okay, so, and there are much simpler explanations from the paranormal side. So the question is, what then? I mean, what do we replace it with, right? That makes more sense. I mean, as what I mentioned, you know, could there be a multiverse? Could there be dark sectors? You know, dark sectors, that means they are interpenetrating our space, huh? And are these UFOs or UAPs, are they coming from this dark sector? For example, could there be a dark Earth? I mean, if there's a dark sector, as what I mentioned, Alpha 1 is our mirror universe. We are probably inside Alpha 1. We are Alpha 2 universe. This Alpha 2 universe is nested within Alpha 1 universe. Okay, and if our Earth has got a counterpart, which is a dark Earth composed of dark plasma, could these UAPs be from this dark Earth? Okay, so this dark Earth is the lowest energy dark Earth. Huh? We're not talking about the higher energy universes and the higher energy dark Earth. I'm just talking about our neighboring universe. Okay, so if we can entertain that idea, okay, if we can entertain the idea, right, all the problems will be solved. The travel problem is solved immediately because there's nothing to travel. I mean, dark Earth and visible Earth are nested. I mean, they are basically interpenetrating each other. So you don't need to travel anywhere. It's actually they could be in your room right now. So there's no travel problem. Is there any economic problem? Is there any ROI problem? Do they have to incur cost? No, they don't have to incur cost. There's no cost. I mean, they're just there. Most of the time, they unintentionally appear in our space. Most of the time, they don't even know that they're appearing. Because why? Because their particles collide with our particles, and there's an ordinary plasma, a transient ordinary plasma. We see it in a blink of an eye, then it disappears. There is no messaging problem, okay? Because the message is don't destroy the Earth. Who cares? I mean, if you're on the other side or on the other side of the galaxy, why would you care whether you destroy the Earth or not? But a gravitationally coupled dark Earth, that means which is linked to our Earth, it's all the reason why they should be very concerned about our Earth, because if our Earth is destroyed, their Earth, it may have implications for their Earth also, their dark Earth. So the messages that are coming out, okay, from aliens, I mean, if you really think about it, who would actually be concerned or alarmed about destroying the Earth? I mean, the other inhabitants of the Earth, but not this Earth, but dark Earth. So the extended Earth, we are all living in an extended Earth, okay, the visible Earth and the dark Earth. The dark Earth inhabitants are the ones who will be logically really concerned about that. In terms of the paranormal enigma, okay, it solves it completely, because we are talking about a parallel universe, which is explained in a lot of metaphysical literature. Okay, the subtle bodies, the ghosts and things like that. Okay, they are all this paranormal anecdotal evidence, right? All of it can be explained by assuming there is a plasma sphere and there is dark plasma life forms within that dark plasma sphere, which occasionally interacts with our ordinary matter universe. Now, what's so great about? Previously, I remember I said that there is no ordinary plasma life on Earth. So what's so great about dark plasma? In dark plasma, many physicists since 2008, 2009, okay, have suggested that the dark electromagnetism is much weaker than ordinary electromagnetism. What is the implication of that? So it has a much weaker dark charge. Okay. Now, if you have a weak dark charge, what happens? Basically, the recombination rate is going to be much slower. It's going to allow for charge separation. Plasma does not, I mean, plasma in that plasma sphere, the whole sphere is actually plasma, but the plasma objects or plasma life forms in that plasma sphere is not going to disappear like what it can, like on the ordinary matter Earth, because the recombination rate is very slow. Why? Because of firstly weak dark charge. This has been theorized by Sean Carroll and Lisa Randall and so on and so forth, all these theoretical physicists, and later by A.V. Loeb and like more than 10 physicists agree to the idea that the dark electromagnetism has a much weaker charge. Weaker charge is great because then the plasma is long-lived. It does not disappear on the surface of the Earth. Neither does it burn your body or whatever, because dark matter does not interact with ordinary matter. You could have a dark plasma body, but you don't feel anything because it doesn't interact with the ordinary matter body. Right? Now, first of all, there's weak dark charge. Next thing is there's a neutral particle buffer. I mean, as what I mentioned before, right? Out of the 85% dark matter, right, 15% is self-interacting, 70% is neutral. So you've got a lot of neutral particles acting as a buffer between the charged particles, which slows down the recombination rate even further. And I also theorized that these dark sectors, where this dark Earth is, has elevated temperatures. Remember this, we are talking about a different universe. So that universe had its own Big Bang, just like our universe had its Big Bang, right? And the temperature in that universe, as we get to higher and higher energy universes, right, the temperature actually becomes higher and higher. So with the elevated temperature, the plasma can be long-lived. So why I'm talking to you about all this is that dark plasma is a much better substrate than ordinary plasma to explain any sighting of ordinary plasma life or biological UFOs than ordinary plasma. So based on that, I would say the highest, when you see a sighting, right, a plasma-based sighting, right, the highest probability is that it's just ordinary plasma, transient ordinary plasma, or if you really want to stretch it, it could be protoplasma, ordinary protoplasma life form, like plasma cells, like those lineal plasma spheres, which dissipate in a short while. They are not long-lived. The moderate probability is that they are interterrestrial dark plasma life form. That means your dark Earth, you're nested inside this dark Earth. The life forms are actually from this dark Earth. It's very low probability that extraterrestrial dark plasma life forms, that means not from our neighboring, in other words, these are dark plasma life form, but they are not from dark Earth. They are from someplace else, okay? And occasionally they may appear, but quite rare. It's quite rare. It has been theorized, right, in dark matter physics, right, that by Jacques Diamond and so on and so forth, various researchers, right, that there are actually dark matter clouds of dark matter passing through our solar system every 50 years or so. Okay, and they stay there, but as they come through, right, occasionally you could have extraterrestrial dark plasma life forms in that sense. But they did not come here intentionally. That the fact that they are just driven by this dark plasma cloud to just go through the solar system, okay, is a natural phenomena. They do not actually control it. Okay, so they may not even know coming, and the probability of them passing through Earth is very, very small, because Earth is just a speck of dust, right? And then very, very low probability is extraterrestrial carbon-based life forms from other stellar systems, right? I would say it's very, very low probability. So what we are actually seeing is, most of the time, is ordinary transient plasma life forms or interterrestrial dark plasma life form from our neighboring dark Earth. Now, so the next question is, how do they actually appear? I mean, how do we actually see them, right? I spoke about collisional or dark ionization process, or collisional ionization, just now. That is when the dark matter particles are rushing through the air, right, in the atmosphere, right? They're going to collide with ordinary matter particles. You cannot see the dark matter particles. You cannot see dark matter objects. Okay, they do not interact with ordinary matter, I mean, in a normal way. But if they are rushing, and you know that plasma life forms, if you have studied them, I mean, you know that they actually zip through. They actually move very fast. Most of the plasma life forms actually move very fast. If you have personal experiences, you will also know they move very, very fast. Okay, within 3 seconds they can go around the Earth. Oh no, sorry. I think 3 minutes they can go around the Earth. So there are reasons for this. I've got a paper called Biophysics of Plasma Life Forms, and I explain exactly what the various propulsion systems are. Okay, and remember that dark Earth also has got all these ley lines and these vortexes, right? In other words, they've got a grid of filamentary currents, okay, which plasma life forms can actually use, like a maglev train, okay, like a train levitating on the tracks, right? They actually use those ley lines as tracks to move from one place to another. Those are more advanced beings. But given that the biophysics, they're going to move very fast in the atmosphere, okay, or even on the surface of the Earth. And then when they move very fast, they're going to impact ordinary matter atoms. Okay, when I say collide, I don't know whether to go in deeper, a little bit deeper, but I don't mean physical collision. I mean quantum collisions. I mean, they give a quantum nudge to the atom. Okay, these are mediated through weak interactions. Okay, if you want to know a little bit more about it. So this is the basis for detecting dark matter in various dark matter installations today. So they're actually using this method to try to detect dark matter today. Millions of dollars of installations all over the Earth in order to detect it using this method. Another method that we're using is the kinetic mixing. Now, I mentioned about ordinary electromagnetism. I mentioned about dark electromagnetism. Now, electromagnetism, both these electromagnetisms have a U1 gauge structure. A U1 gauge structure. That means although they are ordinary and dark, they share the same symmetries, the U1 symmetry. Okay, so that allows the dark photon. Okay, if there's a dark photon here, right? The dark photon actually converts to ordinary photon occasionally in certain conditions. Like for example, like moving through a magnetic fields and things like that. So if the dark photon can convert to ordinary photons, if you have vortexes, right? In sacred sites, you have vortexes, right? What is whirling around that is dark photons, not ordinary photons. But those dark photons will occasionally convert into ordinary photons, and they will convert back to dark photon, and so on and so forth. You'll just convert. This is not very speculative. No, it is actually something similar is happening with neutrinos. Neutrinos actually convert from tau neutrino to the ordinary electrons to mu neutrinos. So as they pass through the atmosphere, right, neutrinos, or pass through the Earth, right, they actually go through 3 different flavors. So it's very, very theoretically sound. Okay, this concept is theoretically sound. Kinetic mixing is one. Okay, dark ionization is the second one, that you can occasionally interact with the dark plasma life form. The third one is what I mentioned just now about having portals. Okay, mediated by a particle which can mediate a 5th fundamental force. Currently, the most popular one is the X17 particle. Okay, the X17 particle actually mediates and communicates between dark matter and ordinary matter. That's the theory. Now, so there are already 3 ways of interacting between ordinary matter and dark matter, and then the dark matter, not of the higher energy universe, just our neighboring universe. Okay. Now, what happens when you see this ordinary plasma appearing? Okay, in the UFO literature, you always see, oh yeah, it could. Sometimes it appears very bright, shining very brightly in a glow mode, in a gentle glow mode, or very strong arc mode, or it could be a shadow object, right? A dark UFO or bright UFO, or it could be that the UFO is there but you can't see it because it's transparent. Now, why does this happen? This happens because of the frequency between the plasma and the frequency of the ambient frequency of the atmosphere. If the plasma frequency is less than the ambient light in the ordinary light frequency, okay, the light basically, see, this is called the plasma frequency gate. If the gate is low, if the plasma frequency is low, all the light just goes through the plasma, goes through the ordinary plasma. So in other words, the ordinary plasma is invisible, is transparent. Okay. Now, having said that, right, although it is invisible, right, it creates a kind of a lens, so that if you look through it, you will find that objects behind the lens, right, may be warped, may be warped. So if you're looking through if there's a UFO that is, or unidentified object, which is like a lens moving through the environment. Imagine a lens moving through and warping the environment behind it. This is the sort of like when the plasma frequency is less than the frequency of the ambient light. If the plasma frequency is the same as the ambient light frequency, what happens is that there is resonance. I mean, because they are both the same frequency, there will be what we call a resonant absorption. Resonant absorption means there's no light. You appear as a dark object, as a shadow object. Okay, so during this resonant absorption, energy can be absorbed for both objects. That means energy can be absorbed by the ordinary plasma from the surrounding ambient light. But in this case, the appearance is a dark shadow, which you often see in UFO sightings. Now, if the plasma frequency is higher, okay, this is a third example. If the plasma frequency is higher, then the ambient light frequency is going to shine very, very brightly. This is called the arc or glow mode. Okay, so all these three examples explain to you that can explain a lot of UFO sightings, I'll say. I mean, whether you're talking about the invisible warped images or the dark shadows or the bright, gentle glow or the arc, you know, all this different manifestation of the same ordinary, of the ordinary plasma that is being generated in a driven process by the dark plasma life form. Notice that you don't actually see the dark plasma life form. You're only seeing the representation of the dark plasma life form in terms of ordinary plasma. You can't see the dark plasma life form unless you're a clairvoyant. Okay, so that explains that. Now, it also explains a lot of other things. I mentioned about the fifth force, the X17 particle. Now, the X17 particle actually sticks. It's a dark matter particle that can actually stick to ordinary matter particles. So if a dark plasma life form is around the corner, right, and ordinary matter particles actually sticks to it, if it drops to the ground, it's going to produce all these sounds. I mean, touch sounds and, you know, sounds like a metallic shell. Okay. Now, there's also an enigma relating to, you know, this often cited enigma where the UFO turns 90 degrees, right? How can a big, enormous metallic object just, you know, just turn 90 degrees and again 90 degrees to the left and 90 degrees to the right? But it all makes sense if you think of it as a dark plasma, a very, very tenuous light dark plasma life form, which is projecting ordinary plasma. Because it has virtually no mass. Okay, so the dark plasma life form can actually move around very erratically, almost like a microbe. You know, the microbe in the petri dish, right? It actually moves like. So that explains that. But I want to just diverge a little bit because just now I talked about the beams, right? The plasmoids evolve into vortexes. The vortexes twist the magnetic fields. The magnetic fields allows plasma to be ejected out of the body. So you can actually create beams out of it. Now, these beams can be used for a variety of things, for healing purposes. I mean, let's say in Mirren apparitions, right? The beams come out, is healing. Okay, it can be used for defense purposes. So you can have a plasma bullets. you using the beam, but the beam can also be used for communication purposes. In other words, it can actually project a hologram. So maybe just now when I was talking about the dark object and the light object, you may think about, you know, you're actually seeing an actual object, you know. And how that is possible is because even in Mirren apparitions, right, look at it carefully. Look at the pictures of the Mirren apparitions carefully. Do you realize that it's translucent? And it is more like a hologram rather than an actual physical object. Okay, this can be projected by a dark plasma life form, and I've gone into it very in quite detail. I mean, in that paper called Plasma Life Forms Biophysics. And the holograms, there could be different types of holograms. So what you're seeing is a hologram. But having said that, remember, you also have a plasma body. I mean, let's say, I mean, I can't say you have. I mean, let's speculate that you also have a plasma body, right? Now, plasma bodies are different from ordinary matter bodies because why? They're electromagnetic bodies. In other words, they actually radiate. They actually transmit electromagnetic waves. Now, if these electromagnetic waves pass through the atmosphere and reach the hologram that this dark plasma life form is generating, what do you think will happen? It'll actually modify the hologram into what you are thinking about. If you just saw a UFO program on TV and you look at that hologram, you're going to see a UFO that you saw on TV. Okay? If you're thinking of, you know, the historical Mary or the the mystical Mary, right? You're going to see her in that hologram. So the object is a combination of you and the plasma life form creating the hologram. But having said that, it does not mean that that there's no spiritual significance, because plasma life forms are advanced beings. They are actually the parallel universe or the parallel dark earth is actually considered a more advanced civilization than us. So they actually they would be more advanced being would be inhabiting them. And having said that, in certain cases, it could be just a staging ground. I mean, the neighboring universe could be a staging ground for a much more advanced being from a much higher energy universe. Okay, so we can't rule out completely that these are not, you just say, just because I can explain it in terms of hologram and your thoughts, it doesn't mean that that object or that being is what you are imagining them to be. It could be a very advanced being. Okay, and if it's concerned about its terrain, its habitat, the dark earth being destroyed, it will come in the form of a Marian apparition to warn you not to destroy the earth. Does it make sense? Yeah. Now the smell of sulfur. Okay, in UFOs, UFO sightings, you also have the smell of sulfur. Now, how can this possibly be? So the dark plasma life form generates ordinary plasma. Ordinary plasma generates pulsating electromagnetic fields. Electromagnetic fields cause redox reactions in atmospheric pollutants and skin lipids, and also your mouth. Okay, and also your nose. Okay, so it affects you, biologically. And hearing voices and internal buzzing. Okay, this is also what you find not only in UFO sightings, but also Marian apparitions. People say they hear buzzing sounds and hearing voices. Now, the ordinary plasma that the dark plasma life form generates can generate microwaves. Okay, the microwave generated by that plasma, the ordinary plasma, can create what we call thermoplastic acoustic waves that can travel to your body via bone conduction. You even have earphones nowadays that work on bone conduction, right? So this microwaves can actually generate sounds. Although other people cannot hear it, you can hear it because it's going through bone conduction. You can even hear voices and talking and everything, but it's actually going through your bones then to your hearing cognitive system, basically. So using this plasma template, right, you can basically explain so many things. I can go on. I mean, this is what I say, 1% of 1% of what I actually have so far researched on. Now, if there's a dark biosphere, a parallel dark biosphere, what I suggested in my paper is that SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, should have a project where they search for interterrestrial intelligence. I mean, they're pointing their telescopes to the stars and all, but it could be that the life forms that they're actually going to encounter is actually just for your neighbor, your neighboring planet, which you call dark earth. So SETI is a search for interterrestrial intelligence. Okay, so I'm actually I've decided that I'm gonna have a sort of a project called Search for Interterrestrial Intelligence, where I'm the researcher. So in my name card, right, I'll say J. Alfred, researcher, Search for Interterrestrial Intelligence, which is quite funny, but the point here is that you don't have to search for extraterrestrial intelligence when there's so many interterrestrial intelligence which are interacting with you now and then. Okay, and there are so many ways of actually interacting them. I already spoke about kinetic mixing, about collisional ionization, about X17, and so on and so forth. And all these dark plasma life forms, right, they generate ordinary plasma. And even the ley lines, right, as the particles rush through, right, they generate ordinary plasma. Now, this ordinary plasma is not hot plasma, it's cold plasma. okay, that you use in the medical laboratories also to heal. Okay, so when these ley lines and the sacred sites, right, they may contain cold plasma. Cold plasma actually heals. Okay, so all this this plus. So what I suggested in the paper is to have keep monitoring cold plasma trails over Earth. Get a satellite or a few satellites to monitor cold plasma trails on the surface of the Earth. This is one of the many things that I've recommended, right? So there are ways to approach it on a more scientific basis, but of course there are people who are searching for the ordinary plasma UFOs. I'm not talking about ordinary plasma UFOs. I'm talking about the dark plasma UFOs that generate ordinary plasma, which you can detect. Okay, but it will be at very, very low levels. Nevertheless, it can be tracked if you want to. Now, just like SETI, right? Just like NASA SETI, right? I've also suggested a lot of the sort of the biosignatures that dark plasma life forms can give off. So what NASA SETI does, one of the things that they do is to look out for biosignature, ordinary biosignatures like methane, carbon dioxide, DNA sequences, fossil records, and so on and so forth from the various planets, okay, that they are actually looking at. So what I suggest that, you can also look for dark plasma signatures in this project called Search for Inter-Terrestrial Intelligence, like unexplained low energy dark radiation. Through kinetic mixing, dark photons can convert to ordinary photons. That means there could be low energy dark radiation, which you can track. Okay, ordered plasma oscillations from vortex structures like the secret sites, right? You would have plasma oscillations from there. You can track it. And also the ley lines where the charged particles are rushing through, they're going to collide with ordinary matter particles and produce ordinary plasma, cold plasma, which you can also track with satellites and with on the ground. Okay, then the next question is, where exactly should I point my telescope to, or where should I point my detector to? Based on the analysis of our neighboring dark Earth, right? Most of the highest density plasma life forms, dark plasma life forms, would be inhabiting what I call the CTS zone. Okay, the CTS zone here, that means the crust and the lower layers of the atmosphere, the troposphere and the stratosphere, and a little bit of the higher part of the mantle. So over here, right, you have the highest density dark plasma life forms. Highest density, why? Because then it will be much easier to detect the ordinary plasma from them, because there'll be more particles interacting with our ordinary matter particles. So this is called the CTS zone. So if you're undertaking a detection program, right, you don't have to go to the thermosphere or the ionosphere. Most of the interaction events will happen around the troposphere, the stratosphere, the crust, and even a little bit of the upper layer of the mantle. Then the second question is, when will they appear, right? Now that we know where it will appear, the second question is, when will they appear? There are a lot of dark matter experiments around the world, right? And one of the experiments is called the Dama Libra experiment. And what they have found is that every June, right, towards June, right, there is a sudden upsurge in dark matter particles moving through the Earth. Okay, dark matter particles are being ejected out of, from the center of the galaxy, as well as various other bodies. So what they notice is around June, right, there is an increase. Now, if you know that, then the question is, you would expect, okay, a lot of sightings around this period, around June. But you have to take into account the location of Dama Libra, okay, in Italy. So basically, you have to sort of like tweak your latitude to know when it will appear. It could appear in July, it could appear in August, right, in your particular location. Now, the Chinese have a curious festival called the Ghost Festival. I do not know whether you know. The August Ghost Festival is very common in Singapore to see people praying, around August. The reason why they have the Ghost Festival is that they say in that period, there are more sightings of ghosts, which actually ties in to this Dharma Libra kind of a detection of what we call seasonal density modulations. Okay, so you know roughly where these life forms will appear, and you know roughly when. Okay, that actually helps in the detection strategy. Now, as what I say, all this stuff that's coming out is actually like 1% of what we call the dark plasma hypothesis. The dark plasma hypothesis, which I published in 2005, but they don't only explain like just UAPs or UFOs. They also explain ghosts very, very, very easily. They also explain mirroring apparitions. They explain abductions. Abductions meaning that we assume that you have another body, and it's not the ordinary matter body that's going out of the window, but it's actually your dark plasma body which is going out of the window. Okay, and he explains ley lines and sacred sites. Okay, so all this stuff is all offshoots of that particular main theory, which actually focuses on the nature of the nature of reality and the multiverse. So all this comes up from there. So that's the end of my presentation. And yeah, most of the stuff you can get from academia.edu, the papers. I would recommend academia.edu because it actually contains the latest papers that I have. And of course, I have a YouTube channel if you want to watch it. Because it explains a little bit more clearly. But the YouTube channel has got different types of videos. One is a simple explainer, but then the audio deep dive, they are actually quite detailed. It's actually quite detailed. And there's also an audio debate between two AIs about the particular theory. So you get a balanced view. It's not a skewed view. So okay, so that ends my presentation.
Thank you. That was amazing. Wow. Thank you so much. Want to open it up to questions or comments? Anybody want to comment?
I'm looking at the chat. Okay, I'd like to ask you a question. Are all these things new, or have you heard of it before?
I think the theories we were familiar with, but the way you put them together, like I thought that was just remarkable. The dark earth, and yeah, that was it makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask you because I have a I noticed that you in one of your papers you commented on Avi Loeb and his work with the Galileo project and what he was doing. So I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but he's been tasked with a UAP Science Advisory Council. So he's going to be advising the White House here in America and the FBI and a lot of different intelligence groups about what UAPs are. And he's most of the people on his committee are from his Galileo project at Harvard. So
okay, of course I've heard of Avi Loeb and I've quoted him a number of times.
Right.
And also his collaborators, because some of the stuff actually comes from his collaborators, not actually from him. And so I would say the main limitation of any government committee currently, and the main limitation of a lot of scientists, is that they only focus on the 5% of ordinary matter. They just go around this, this is this concept, but there could be a little bit of activity from ordinary UAPs, okay, but there's a lot of activity coming from dark UFOs.
So I was just going to mention that this whole his his advisory council is umbrellaed over a UAP governing board. So that's the umbrella organization. And their mission is to actually address national security threats of UAP. So they're
Yeah,
spinning everything into this, it's a threat. And
yeah. So basically, I think their approach is really grounded on ordinary matter, lah, basically. So I mean, it could also be Russian and Chinese, stuff that is, that's moving around.
well, that's true.
Chinese are technologically very sophisticated, right? So
Yeah.
it could be that also, but what they will find is an occasional, object that could suggest some, but not complex. I don't believe complex intelligent life will come all the way from another stellar system to here, as what I've already mentioned. I don't think it makes sense for them economically. I don't think it makes sense in terms of the messaging, right? But I do think that ordinary plasma generated as a hologram by dark plasma life from the space that we are already living in makes would constitute most of the sightings, including
Okay.
ghosts and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I find your presentation intriguing. I have two questions. One, I'm curious if you're aware of this plasma scientist, Douglas
Yes.
Gabriel.
I've read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious if it just came in the mail yesterday or the day before. I haven't even started reading it yet,
Okay.
but I was just
Does he
curious.
mention dark plasma? Does he mention dark plasma?
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah. So most of
but
these, see the
he has this other
limitation.
one,
Yeah.
the celestial cosmos, but it's coming from a perspective of Rudolf Steiner and the
Yeah.
Theosophist. But I just wondered if I just found out about him, and so I'm reading into if you had an opinion on that. That
Yeah,
was my
I've saw he's got some, I think some YouTube videos or so, I think.
yeah,
Also.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first. The second question, in terms of using the notion of dark matter or dark plasma, dark energy, matter, and all that. How does this, or does it connect then also with 0 point energy and what's going on in terms of or the interface, what happens, because that in terms of the vacuum, the void, is there a connection, or can you speak to that?
Okay, sure. And see, as far as says, the main limitation of all these people who are now opening up to plasma life is that they're just focusing on the 5% ordinary matter. And even the 0 point energy they're talking about is just this universe, just ordinary matter universe. Now, if you're living in a multiverse, right, with nested universes, right, each universe has its own vacuum and vacuum energy. And in other words, each universe has its own 0 point energy. So our universe may have a certain 0 point energy, right? I call it the alpha 2 universe, right? It's sitting inside an alpha 1 universe, which is higher energy, right? That higher energy universe has a vacuum energy density which is much higher. You go to the universe after that is even higher vacuum energy density. So the vacuum energy or the 0 point field, a lot of people don't talk about this. I mean, they don't even are not even aware of this, that the 0 point energy, actually there are many different types of 0 point energies
Mhm.
which are linked to different universes.
And how many universes would there be? I mean, in terms of a higher 1, 2, 3, infinite, or is there a structure in terms of 12? What would be your
Yeah.
guesstimate on the number of other multi-universes? How many is multi?
Yeah. So basically, you see, quantum physics theories like many worlds hypothesis, right? They just theorize, universe just keep exploding, or eternal inflation theory. You got bubbles and all over the place. Is it really that disorganized? That's the question. So my paper that I'm working on now is called the local multiverse. There could be a lot of other multiverses all around in that space, that very abstract space. But I just focus on the local multiverse. So your question, I will direct it to our local multiverse because that's all what we want to know. Because what happens in the other multiverse, I mean, we're not causally connected to them. So I mean, you can leave that aside. But as far as our local multiverse is concerned, if we start from the what you call the geometric multiverse, I've got 3 layers of the multiverse. And one is it starts from a mathematical universe. It goes to a pre-geometric universe. Then it comes to a geometric universe. Geometric universe is the one that that most people will be familiar with. Okay, it starts off with an 11-dimensional only spatial universe, only spatial dimension. 11 dimensions is also, of course, the under M theory, right? They also start off with 11 dimensions, and they have 10 space dimensions and 1 time dimensions. But in my theory, I've also got 11 dimensions, but it starts off all spatial dimensions. When it drops into the 10-dimensional universe, right? One of the spatial dimensions rotates into a temporal dimension, a time dimension. And as the energy falls, right, the temporal axis, right, or the time axis becomes stronger and stronger. So the time signature in our 3D universe is very strong, but the time signature in a higher energy universe will be very weak. In other words, there's what we call time dilation, that the past and the future are all very fluid, just like a spatial dimension, the time dimension in the higher energy universes, right? So as you go up the ladder, right, from the 3D universe, you go up. So what I posit is you've got your 11D, then you've got four quantum-like universes, which I call the S10 sectors, S10. And
Do you have a paper on this?
Yeah.
Would you send that reference to Rebecca, please? I'd really like to read this.
It will be coming out. It will be coming out in about a few weeks. But if you read my books, previously I described them as Q sectors, but now I'm
Q sectors. Okay.
Yeah, Q sectors mean quantum. It means
quantum sectors.
As we go up, it's not only the energy rising, but the Planck scales which determine quantum phenomena actually expands. So the degree of so-called quantumness actually increases as you go to higher and higher energy universe, which I think most of you will intuitively agree that we become more and more, and time becomes more and more dilute as we go to higher energy. So if we got 4 S10 universes and we got 6 E6 universes under there. Okay, the 6 E6 universes, you got a 6D universe, you got a 5D universes, and 4D and 3D. Okay, and each of these universes, like the 3D universe, has got a mirror universe, 4D has a mirror universe, 5D has a mirror universe, 6D has a mirror universe. Altogether, there are 8 universes there under the E6 group. Now, why I call it the E6 is the E6 is a symmetry group in physics. Okay, once you pin it down to E6, the symmetry group, you can predict a lot of things. Okay, and the mirror universe actually pop out naturally from the E6 group. It has been very well studied in physics, the E6 group symmetry. So you've got your S10 symmetry, which encompasses everything. The E6 group is within that. So to answer your question, there are 4 quantum-like universes, and there are 8 transiting from quantum to classical universes. Okay, so altogether there are 12 universes, excluding the 11D. 11D is what we call a Euclidean universe, meaning that there is no time. If there's no time, it's just flat space, it's called Euclidean. The moment time comes in, it's called Lorentzian. When it becomes a Lorentzian universe, Einstein's theories apply. Right? So altogether, there are basically 12 universes in my local multiverse, which a lot of you will immediately recognize that it seems to resonate with the metaphysical literature. So I'm getting a cue from the metaphysical literature to design a multiverse, which is what we call topologically constrained. That means, in other words, if you read quantum physics or eternal inflation theory, right, in mainstream physics, right, they don't really specify. They've got all universes popping out here and there, but they don't really explain how things are organized within that. So all these 12 universes, they are nested within each other, just like your body, all the subtle bodies are nested within your ordinary matter body. They are nested. That means our universe is actually the smallest little nugget inside the 12 universes. We are the last one. We are the lowest energy. And that's where the vacuum energy goes to almost zero. The vacuum energy in our universe is the lowest in the multiverse. So if you're talking about 0-point field, the 0-point field energy is the lowest in our universe. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I would really like to read that
Yeah.
paper because
Yeah.
the temporality, that's
Yeah,
key.
it's a bit, it can get a bit complicated, I'll say. I
Mhm.
mean, unless you're a hard nut who really wants to know all this. But generally, I mean, it's okay because so long as I mean, if you're under some practice or you're doing some practice or what, you know about a little bit about this, it may sort of help you. But unless you are physics kind of oriented, it's
Mhm.
it's like you can become crazy. I mean, sort of, I don't want you to become crazy. Uh, you just absorb what you want to absorb. Even I stop myself from thinking too much. Okay, because there's no end
Mhm.
to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, just your other questions about these authors, right? If you read these authors, I look at the books and I look at the YouTube videos. You know, they're focusing more on ordinary. They're just focusing on the lowest energy universe. They're not talking about other universes or dark plasma or whatever. Mostly, Rudolf Steiner, he is talking about dark plasma, but he doesn't know it. I mean, plasma was only coined. The term plasma was coined in 1927 by Irving or Langmuir. Before that, people may see things, but they don't really identify it as plasma. So all the theosophists, right, Leadbeater, Annie Besson, Rudolf Steiner, they just talk about it.
The radiant
And
matter. It was
yeah,
radiant matter. Yeah.
so basically, actually, a lot of this stuff actually will resonate with theosophists, but it is based on a scientific understanding. Whereas for them, they base it on clairvoyant observation, which is very helpful, especially Leadbeater's and Annie Besson's clairvoyant observations. In other words, empirical evidence, which is not admitted into mainstream science, but nevertheless, they are empirical evidence of the structures they are talking about. So yeah, so most of these uh, authors, right, they still haven't gone up the next ladder, which is to talk about dark plasma. They still haven't, right? But they'll come to it. I mean, it took them 20 years. When I published my book in 2005, it took them 20 years just to come up with ordinary plasma life. Okay, I think another 5 years they will start talking about dark plasma.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Now, dark matter is something that's very actively researched in the physics community, and there's a lot of evidence for it from various sources. So it's something that we have to take more seriously. Like for example, Robert Temple, right? He may he may he may not see dark matter as very serious proposition because he feels that, oh yeah, you got MOND, MOND, which is a rival to dark matter, and you've got this theory and that theory. But let me tell you, I've done a paper where I surveyed all the theories. Okay, it's called Reviewing the Evidence for Dark Matter, and dark matter has the most. The dark matter theory has the most evidence and the myriad sources of evidence that dark matter does exist. So I think it's quite reliable to sort of carve out a theory using dark matter. But what you realize is some people will say, oh, no, Newton's theories must be modified and so on and so forth. But things like modified Newtonian dynamics, MOND, MOND is a very popular rival to dark matter theory, but it only is successful on a certain scale. In large scale, it fails, and in clusters of galaxies, it fails. And in laboratories, right? In laboratories, they found that the predictions made by MOND theory fails in the laboratory when you go to micro scales. There is no deviation from Newton's laws. So again, it establishes dark matter theory. Although dark matter theory in certain cases, yeah, you have problem here, you have problem there, blah, 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 blah. But dark matter theory is a more reliable sort of track to go into. But what the mainstream science now doesn't have is they don't have a structured approach to talking about the multiverse. They just talk about, just every time an atom moves to the right, you have a universe appearing. Every time it moves to the left, under the many worlds hypothesis and under internal inflation theory, they have just bubbles of universes just appearing. But they don't tell you how it is structured. What tells you how it is structured is actually metaphysical literature. But they really don't care about metaphysical literature. They consider it as inadmissible evidence. But if you use it, it can be very useful. So
we have
my theory
another-
is what I call the local multiverse, with this 4 quantum universes and this 8 classical universe.
Okay, Jay, we have one more question and then we'll wrap it up. Janaea?
Sure.
Jay, thank you. I'm coming at this from the metaphysical side, and far less by the physics side. And so I'm keenly interested in the notion of the multiverse. It has a intuitive yes. I have an probably outside of the box question. Have you looked at where your theories might they explain the crop circle phenomena? I don't mean those that are maybe human, some are. Others appear to be unexplained. I'm just curious if they fit into the theory somewhere.
I think crop circles. I've not done much research on it, but I think I'm quite skeptical about it. Generally, I think most of them are done by ordinary matter humans.
No, I would disagree. I spent
Of course.
20 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
There are
of course,
some-
people will disagree. I mean, there are
Yeah.
different points of
There's
view.
a level of highly accurate and extremely intricately patterned beyond known, I should say, known mechanical means. Doesn't mean that there aren't
Yeah.
things.
I mean, you have to tell me for me to learn a little bit about this, but
Yeah.
But generally
particularly
speaking,
those I think in the 90s.
I actually have so much on my hands. So I mean, especially building the multiverse.
Yes, I did say it might be outside of your purview, but
I put a really good link in the chat, temporarytemples.co.uk. They have really good visuals, and they've been since the early 90s. So it's a really good place to start. And you'll actually see quite a few 9 or 12 patterned formations in terms of your 12 multi-universes. So you'll have fun with that, temporarytemples.co.uk.
Yeah, you know the perennial philosophy, the perennial philosophy. Basically, a lot of these mystical traditions and all, they basically say, they talk about 7 bodies, right? They talk about 7 bodies, or something like that, right? Okay, I said that in the E6 group, right? You've got each universe is a mirror universe, so altogether you got 4, the 6D, 5D, 4D, and 3D, 4, right? Times 2, right? You got 8 universes. So we are in one of the universes, right? And we've got 7 other universes. What do you think? Where do you think all those bodies come from? So it tallies with it agrees with the metaphysical literature, and it not only agrees, it actually explains. Because the E6 group is a mathematical group, it's a mathematical symmetry group. So it is not something that we just cook up, and it agrees with the metaphysical literature, right? And what are those 4 quantum universes that I was talking about above the E6? Okay, you always hear in Buddhism about formless regions, or Hinduism, formless regions. Those 4 higher energy universes are basically the formless. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. Is it the Arupa regions, in Buddhism? So what it means is that the 8 universes, the lower energy universes in the E6 group are lower energy. They harbor macroscopic plasma life and plasmonic life also, and photonic life. Okay, it's not only plasma, it's plasma's interaction with light and photons. Okay, so you've got different types. As you go to higher energy universe, you got plasmonic. You go to the higher energy universe, you got macroscopic photonic life forms in the 6D universe, 6-dimensional universe, in the E6 group. What is that after that? After that, there's no macroscopic life form. There's only particulate life forms. The highest 4 energy universes, right? They are made up of high energy particles. And these particles, as they go up, they become quantum, they become particle waves. They are not just particles, they're particle waves. Okay, ruled by quantum, the rules of quantum physics. So if you read any metaphysical literature from Hinduism, Buddhism, they talk a lot about the formless regions. A particle is basically invisible. There's no form. There's no body. Whereas if you go down to the E6 group, you can see all those. So all this local multiverse, right, actually ties up all the metaphysical literature. It is basically reflective of whether Rudolf Steiner is talking about it, or Leadbeater is talking about it, or Barbara Brennan is talking about it. Barbara Brennan also says there's so many different universes, okay, and so on and so forth. But the beautiful thing about this is agrees in metaphysical literature, but it agrees completely with current physics. There is no non-compliance with current physics theories in this particular local multiverse. So in that sense, it may be very useful, not only for the scientists, for the metaphysical, the people who are reading metaphysical literature,
Thank you so much for coming, Jay. And we look forward to reading more of your papers on academia.edu, as well as your the new paper you have coming out. So thank you so much for joining. And maybe we could at some time come together to maybe brainstorm to push your what do you call it, SITI theory. I think that would be a really exciting project for a group like this, because it integrates metaphysics and physics and dark plasma, and I think it needs to be heard among all this, Department of War and UAP threat, and it's really an important contribution.
Thank
So
you.
maybe in the future we could talk about how we could be an advocate for you and your theories.
Great, that would be great. Yeah, and thank you everyone for the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, happy solstice to everybody tomorrow. Summer
Thank
solstice.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.